Hi there, and welcome once again to Peninsula Players Presents, the history of Peninsula Players Theater. And I'm here once again with Audie. How are you, Audie?
I'm doing good today.
Good. Staying warm because it's pretty frigid out
It
there.
is. Ooh.
Well, we're doing okay. So last week in the interview that came on Tuesday, we finished looking at 1959, which was a chaotic year with the players on the brink of collapse because of financial problems. But one of the highlights of that season was the sixth show of the season, which was A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams, in which Hilda Simms, a Black actress, played Blanche Dubois, along with Howard Witt as Stanley Kowalski. And as we were preparing to do that interview and looking at Hilda Simms, we discovered some amazing things about her and her life. And so in celebration of Black History Month, we're going to take a look at just Hilda Simms today, her extraordinary life and career. And Audie has done a ton of research on this.
She was just amazing to look into her life and everything she accomplished and what she did. Every time I learned another little jewel, I was just like, oh my goodness, just.
Yeah, really, she led an extraordinary life, and we're really happy to share this with you. So let's start at the very beginning,
Okay.
a very good place to start. So she was born in August 15th, 1918.
In 1918, and she was the eldest for her parent, the eldest child, and her family, her parents were raised in Louisiana around New Orleans, and then they moved up to Minnesota, and she became the eldest of 13 eventually kids. So
13. I was the eldest of 6, and that seemed too many. And they were devout Catholics.
yes.
And as a child, I think it sounds like Hilda started exhibiting her talents quite early.
She did. She was very well known in the neighborhood as an excellent singer. And the neighborhood that they grew up in was very melded. So there were Catholic homes, there were Jewish homes, there were people of other races all living in the neighborhood. And they would have neighborhood parties, and Hilda and her good friend would perform little entertainments, or they would read poetry, or she ran a lemonade stand, and the kids would go up and ask, are you going to sing a song today? Are you going to perform for us today? And she would do that. So she was always performing. Like, this was just seemed to be her calling.
And I believe you said she would make her siblings do plays with her.
Yes, she would have them do plays with her. And she won a talent show when she was very young as well. And so she was involved in performance, and her mother brought her to what was known as I believe the Phyllis Wheatley Community Center to learn how to perform poetry and to do some of these dramatic readings as well, and participate in the arts and hone her skill.
One of the things her mother didn't skimp on were music lessons.
Right. She's quoted as saying that she could recall a time when her mother didn't have new shoes or a new dress, but all of the kids had music lessons. And that's, wow, that was, the focus of the arts for that family. It was amazing. So.
And it was nice that it landed in someone who had some very real talent and used all of this throughout her life.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went to high school at St. Margaret's Academy in Minneapolis, and was interesting because she was indeed the first person of color to be admitted there.
Correct. And on scholarship as well. Hilda was very bright. She was very smart. And so she gets a scholarship to attend, and she's there and within that. And she's also involved in the dramatics program within the school. And she got to portray Lady Macbeth at one point throughout her high school and schooling career. And she continues to help the the kids at Phyllis Wheatley within their dramatic program as well, and is just really continuing to grow in her skill sets.
And we also have to note that she won a posture award at St. Margaret's.
Yes.
And also, that's what I need.
I think, yeah.
And it was also at that time, we just want to mention that she met William Simms when she was 15.
Right. They went to school together. They either were classmates or they met in one of the jobs that she held. So not in addition to also being in high school, she held several part-time jobs. She was a bathroom attendant at the Hollywood Theater. She was babysitting. She'd go from her babysitting job to making salads at a restaurant for the evening patrons. She, it was multitasking. So being the eldest child, having part-time jobs, she was very mature for her age as well, but she met William Simms and he would walk her to a show together and then walk her home. And her mother was, oh, he's a nice boy. I like him a lot. So.
And that's good, because the reason we mention him now, meeting him when she was 15, is that later on they get married. So she graduates from St. Margaret's Academy, again, the first person of color to graduate from that school. And she goes on to college, to the University of Minnesota.
She does. And again, she's still working all of these part-time jobs to help put her way through the school, as well as now being a model for the art program there, and working as a professor's assistant in the dramatic department. So she's still trying very hard to earn her way through school, but it becomes too much of a financial burden and she has to withdraw, but not before doing a production of You Can't Take It With You. So she's done that on campus, and then she does another production with
Kiss the Boys.
Kiss the Boys, right? That's it. I just don't know with what group.
Right. And so she was studying to be a teacher. And during that time, Gertrude Lawrence, a well-known actress, was on tour with a show called Skylark.
She was, and Hilda gets backstage and is knocking on her dressing room door, just letting her know how much she desires to be part of the theater and does she have any advice. And Gertrude graciously has a conversation with her and talks to her and gives her some advice. But the best advice, she says, is don't do it. It's just going to give you heartache. And Hilda ignores it. So
I ignored it too. When my parents told that to me, I ignored them too, and here we are. Yes. Now, William Simms also went to the University of Minnesota, right?
He did.
And in June of 1940, they got married.
They got married, and his mother in article said it was a lovely wedding and that she had a 6-foot train, and it was just a very sweet ceremony. And Bill was also very encouraging of her education. He said, even if we get married, you can, you'll still go to school. You can still finish what education you want. And she got offered from Hampton a fellowship in teaching. So they moved to Virginia, and she then is teaching English and dramatics while continuing to study and earn her degree. And while she's there, she also participates in the drama program. And
this is the Hampton Institute in Hampton, Virginia, which later becomes Hampton University, and which was a private, historically Black university at the time. And Bill moves out there too.
He does. He is at Camp Lee, but he was still in the Army. He was also a sergeant, and he's there. So they're both in the state.
And again, she's teaching dramatics and English. And while she is there in March, she played Catherine in Wuthering Heights.
She does. And that's kind of a neat thing. So
because
that production, because Peninsula Players in 1945 has done Wuthering Heights with Caroline as Catherine and Richard
Angarola.
Angarola as Heathcliff, and eventually Hilda and Richard are going to meet.
And we will talk about
We
them.
will.
Yes. So in May of 43, she graduates from Hampton
Mhm.
and she moves to New York.
She does. She moves to New York and she gets a couple part-time jobs, and one is with the War Office. So she's working the Caribbean desk and she's writing plays and recording radio plays for the soldiers and troops, as well as being a secretary for a film company there. And then she also becomes part of the American Negro Theater.
In Harlem.
Yes. And she starts out working props and running sound. So just like any of our apprentices and interns, she's got her hands in there.
And doing publicity also, I believe.
Right, using those writing skills that she has.
And she's 25 at this point. And just a little bit about the American Negro Theater. It was an outgrowth of the illustrious Negro unit of the Federal Theater Project in Harlem. And there were Negro units in 23 cities across the United States. And the Federal Theater Project, which ran from 1935 to 39, was a theater project established during the Great Depression as part of the New Deal to fund live artistic performances and entertainment programs in the United States. And then the American Negro Theater in Harlem later grew out of that. And Hilda became a part of that.
She did. And there was quite a few who eventually become very prominent, including herself, artists, part of that company and troupe at that time. Ruby Dee, Frederick O'Neill, and several others, including Earl Hyman as well. Very young Earl Hyman. I think he was only 18 or 19 years old at the time.
And she was cast in a play with Ruby Dee, Three's a Family, while she was there. And she's also, taking some speech and movement.
She is. She's taking lessons at the Carnegie Playhouse, working on her poise and stage presence. And it all comes to a fruition. And one of the next projects that the theater is going to do is a production called Anna LaCosta. And it is written and based off of a Polish family. So it wasn't initially written to be performed by any specific ethnic race. And the playwright had been running around for a couple of years trying to find someone to produce it. And it finally comes to the attention of Frederick O'Neill and the other participants at the American Negro Theater, and they decide they mount it. They've cast Hilda in the role of Anna.
And that play was by Philip Yordan, and it opened June 16th in 1944. And it kind of did a lot for Hilda.
It did. It did a lot for the entire company and Broadway producers went to see it and they thought it would be really successful. And so they moved it from the stage in Harlem to Broadway. And when it moved there, it became the first play performed by an entirely Black cast that had nothing to do with racial issues on Broadway. It was the story of a young gal trying to get out of prostitution and into the good graces of her family again. And so it totally, it would cover different subjects. So this is 1944. And with this topic matter, the war is still going on, and it was very popular. And it was, another article I read said tickets were sold out 3 weeks in advance once it did hit Broadway, that it was that popular of a production. And she was getting a lot of accolades for her performance as well.
And it opened August 30th of 1944 and ran for 957 performances, which was an amazing run. And as you said, it was the first time an all Black cast did a play which had non-racial themes. Though earlier that year in New York, in February of 1944, Porgy and Bess opened, but that was a production which was written for an all Black cast.
or the themes. I know one of the castmates in Ana La Costa had 10 to a dozen Broadway credits before that, but it was all of these different, what would be considered stereotypical roles or parts and everything. So this was really a landmark production.
And the cast of Ana Lucasta included Earl Hyman, who, as you said, was 19, Frederick O'Neill, Georgia Burke, and Alice Childress, who became later known very much as a playwright and novelist. And Alice won a Tony nomination for her role in Ana Lucasta. And so that ran till November 30th of 1946. Unfortunately, her mom didn't come see her.
No, her mom never came, and it's reported that she just wasn't interested in seeing her daughter be a prostitute, portraying a prostitute. But she was also a mom of a large family, so whether she also felt she didn't have the time to come out might also be the case. So.
I was glad that my parents still came and saw me in roles like that, so I guess I was lucky. And as you said, she won a lot of accolades for this.
Did considered the best actress of the year, as well as Frederick O'Neill, the best actor considered. Like, so there were all of these different accolades that she was receiving, and from different magazines and sponsorships. You know, there were ads running about hair products, like Snow White hair products. She was then the spokesperson for that. And but she didn't let it all go to her head. She still had maintained her day jobs for the longest time. So she was still working at the film studio at the secretary desk during the day, performing at night. And she brought a friend from Minneapolis who came to see her, who was a columnist, and brought her around with her for the entire day. And they went backstage, they went shopping for a dress that she needed for a press event. And they were in the store, and the sales clerk was like, "You don't look like a star." And Hilda was just like, "We're just, we're the same. We're just all the same kind of people." And she was earning at that time $100 per week for her role. So it was very interesting to just read these sideline comments as to her experiences and what she was doing, and how everybody else was thinking, it was just shining that she was just a natural talent.
And also because of her role in the show, and she was becoming a bit of celebrity, when she went to register to vote, she had some notice for that.
Yeah, I found press clippings where, it was like, oh, she's, doing that. So it was like, bring out the vote, and getting people to encourage to be patriotic and what it is to be an American. And she was very supportive of that, including war bonds, going out to events to help support and raise funds for that, participating in the, USO talents, entertaining the troops and so forth. So she was really, putting it all out there, just like, good Catholic school upbringing. Is that what you learned?
Yes, indeed. And just to follow the track of the Ana Lucasta production, in 1946, then it went to the Chicago Civic Theater.
Right. And then so there's still a cast on performing, I believe, on Broadway, and then they're doing a national tour, and then they're in Chicago for a while. And while they're in Chicago, the director of that production, Harry Wagstaff Gribble, I believe was his full name.
Great name.
And he was very, I looked him up too, and it was very fascinating, his credits and screenwriting credits. And so he's known as also a writer and a songwriter and a performer, and originally from Britain. And so Ana La Costa has brought great acclaim and prominence to him. So he wants to help, and gets together with another producer. Together, they come up with a plan for the next 5 years, because Harry wants to use his claim. So in addition to he also had done the films Johnny Belinda, written the scripts for that with Jane Wyman, and Stella Dallas with Barbara Stanwyck. So he's a prominent writer as well. So Harry gets together with fellow producer Michael Meyerberg, who produced Skin of Our Teeth and Lute Song. And they have come up with a 5-year plan for promoting and developing, I believe the Negra American is a word Harry termed, so that they could promote stage talent, not only for the purpose of putting more members of the race on the boards, but with the long-term view of bettering relations between the races. And this was published in Billboard magazine in December of 1945, is where I found that quote and description of their 5-year plan to do this. And the first thing they come up with Frederick O'Neill of the American Negro Theater is to do a production of Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
And they decide to cast Hilda as Juliet. So while the cast is in Chicago, Hilda starts working with a member of the Goodman School of Drama on Shakespeare and taking classes there, and also working with Harry on presenting Shakespeare. And this project they're planning a long-term project, but it's kind of picking up speed and rumors and chatter in different mills and stuff.
And they're trying to put a production together so that one family they're different races or mixed, or is that right?
Right. So initially it was it going to be an all Black cast? Was it going to be a mixed class? And what they decided to do was to create one of the families Moorish and the other family Caucasian. And so that's the split. And with Hilda as Juliet, and they're looking for a Romeo. And eventually, through a letter of introduction, Richard Angrolero happens to be in Chicago in 1946 after the war. So he's been the fighter pilot, flew 50 missions, did Wuthering Heights at Peninsula Players for 3 days in 1945, and then I think ends up back in Chicago visiting his family.
And he was also at the Players in 1940 season also.
Right, yeah, pre-war, because he toured Wisconsin in Wuthering Heights with Caroline. So he gets an introduction and he gets cast as Romeo. And he is of Italian descent. So he has he's a very tall, handsome young man. So they've got their Romeo and they've got their Juliet, and they're rehearsing in Chicago. Rumor mills are building up. Hilda is very excited for this, and she continues to study it for a year. And she's quoted as one point of saying, "Juliet is a role every girl dreams of. I've been studying it for a year, and I hope I'm a success in it." Anna was a landmark play, and she's hoping that Romeo and Juliet is going to go a little further than that because of what happens when people of different races hate each other blindly, how futile it is to fight endlessly against people you don't understand. And I just thought that was neat to have read that in the paper.
But unfortunately, this production does not happen.
It doesn't happen, and for a variety of reasons. But I want to share one more castmate that I just learned about that was exciting as well to me. Somehow in Hollywood, Charlton Heston gets wind that this is happening, and he wrangles an audition for this production and gets cast as Mercutio. And so he's excited to move out from Hollywood to New York to be a Broadway actor in a play. And I had read that in a biography that was written by Mark Elliott called Charlton Heston, Hollywood's Last Icon. So in case somebody wants to know where I learned that from. So it was this big deal going on, but it didn't happen. Either there wasn't enough backing, the second producer kind of backed out, and it didn't happen. But Harry wanted to keep his actors working or involved in a project. So he, as a screenwriter and a writer, starts writing another show for them. And it's in a totally different direction. It's a comedy. It is
A Lady Passing Fair.
yes. And it's based on the plastic age invades the stage and how plastics and aeronautics are combining at that time.
Mm.
And it involves a fencing match that Angelero has with another fencing master on stage. And Richard and throughout college, was a fencing master. He was an Olympic swimming, being trained to be in the Olympics for swimming. And he's also a master musician. He plays the cello. So they commissioned some music, and there's also cello music in the show, as well as dancing and singing and a farcical comedy. And Earl Hyman is in it, and Hilda is in it, and Frederick O'Neill is in it. And so they do this, and it runs for about a week in Newark, New Jersey. But it's so mishmashy and not really coherent that it just doesn't go anywhere. And it folds, and the cast then starts preparing for a UK tour of Anna Lacosta that then ends up going overseas.
But before that, while she was doing Anna Lacosta in Chicago, she celebrated her birthday on April 15th at Ricardo's.
At Ricardo's. And I was like, okay, what is Ricardo? Because Ricardo's, I found out, was Rick Ricardo's. And he was a very supportive of the arts. And everybody who was on the road and on tour knew of Rick Ricardo. And I was like, why would they know of Rick Ricardo? Well, he ran a restaurant. So actors on tour would go over to Ricardo's afterwards. And he has these beautiful murals that were put up in the restaurant. And eventually, too, I said that, he was going to be Friar Lawrence in
Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, they were going to cast him as Friar Lawrence. And somewhere, I don't remember, I kind of read, I'm not sure if they hired me for my acting talent or because they want some financial backing as a producer.
Well, Ricardo sounds really cool, and I wish it was still around when I started working in Chicago. Though I want to mention that in 47 also that her divorce was finalized from William Simms.
Right. And then she keeps the name Simms because that's part of her stage name. So
then in 1947, Anna Lacosta runs in Chicago, and then they move it to London, and a whole new part of Hilda's life starts there. And we want you to come back and find out about her adventures in London and Paris, and how in 1959 she came to Door County to play Blanche in A Streetcar Named Desire at Peninsula Players Theater. So we'll see you next time. And Audie, thank you. It's been very rewarding working on her.
It's been really fun just to dive in and see all of the places that she's left a mark, from portraits left at the Minneapolis Art Institute to other venues, as well as the New York Public Library. So
indeed, an extraordinary life, and we're very happy to be able to present her like this to you. So Audie, thanks again.
Thanks, Greg.
And we will see you next time.